Từng ngày cứ thế trôi qua, dần dần tôi thấy cũng già. Người ta cứ nói ba hoa rằng tôi cuộc sống xa hoa. Đời người thì có mấy khi làm việc vất vả tận tụy. Còn trẻ cứ cố bây giờ để về già đỡ lo sợ. Nhiều người cứ hỏi tôi stream đến bao giờ. Thật lòng chẳng biết phải kết thúc ở đâu. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 năm nữa hay là làm việc hàng hai đến hết sức thì thôi. Qua thời gian tôi mãi cứ nghĩ vu vơ về cuộc đời. Vì cuộc sống là thế, vốn gì chẳng tô vẽ nên con người. Ta tự lo tự lắng cho cuộc đời. Mong một ngày ta vẽ nên được bức tranh để tặng bản thân. Dù ngày mai sẽ có sóng gió bao tố vây quanh mình, ta sẽ cố vượt qua bên gia đình. Lo sợ chi khó khăn, sống như thế mới đúng đời. Ba 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 ba. Và lúc quần đùi 10 giờ tối để cho chuyên không phản lại hối. Ngày nào cũng lặp đi lặp lại vẫn luôn ngồi một mình cười nói thế thôi. Trong lòng cảm thấy gì ai biết, vui vào cảm thấy gì ai biết. Chẳng cần biết vui hay là buồn cứ tới giờ là khi anh em. Của tập tôi thì trùng vui tính, họp stream thì thành lươn thành đồ. Hứa nhẹ thì thành hứa thành món đồ thì là phùng thanh lịch. Cuộc sống ngày ngủ đêm stream nhiều lúc khiến ta mệt mỏi, nhưng không sao đã có gia đình anh em. Cuộc sống này đủ sống lời, một gì chẳng tô vẽ nên con người. Ta tự lo tự lắng cho cuộc đời. Mong một ngày ta vẽ nên được bức tranh để tặng bản thân. Dù ngày mai sẽ có sóng gió bao tố vây quanh mình, ta sẽ cố vượt qua bên gia đình. Lo sợ chi khó khăn, sống như thế mới đúng đời. Nhiều người cứ hỏi tôi stream đến bao giờ. Thật lòng chẳng biết phải kết thúc ở đâu. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 năm nữa hay là làm việc hàng hai đến hết sức thì thôi. Qua thời gian tôi mãi cứ nghĩ vu vơ về cuộc đời. Vì cuộc sống là thế, vốn gì chẳng tô vẽ nên con người. Ta tự lo tự lắng cho cuộc đời. Mong một ngày ta vẽ nên được bức tranh để tặng bản thân. Dù ngày mai sẽ có sóng gió bao tố vây quanh mình, ta sẽ cố vượt qua bên gia đình. Lo sợ chi khó khăn, sống như thế mới đúng đời. Lo sợ chi khó khăn, sống như thế mới đúng đời.
Woohoo! Another animation. This time we've got a ball moving across the screen, and you guys already know how this is done. We've got a variable x that tells us the position of the ball, a variable speed that tells us how far the ball moves every time. Woohoo! Another animation. This time we've got a ball moving across the screen, and you guys already know how this is done. We've got a variable x that tells us the position of the ball, a variable speed that tells us how far the ball moves every time, and a familiar draw loop where we're redrawing the background every time, setting a fill color, drawing the ellipse at position x, and every single time we're going to change x to be the old value of x plus this variable speed. So if I make speed smaller and press restart so I can get my ball back, you can see it moves slower. Or I could make it negative and it would move backwards, or I could make it 0 and the ball would stop moving. But as long as speed is not 0, eventually the ball is going to go off the screen. And I can always press this restart button to bring it back, but you know, after a while that gets old. Pressing restart and restart. So how about this? When the ball reaches the right edge of the screen, instead of just going off the screen like it's doing now, I want it to turn around. And I know how to turn the ball around. I can just say speed gets -5. If I make the speed negative, then the ball would go backwards. But here's the problem. I only want to change the speed if the ball has reached the right edge. So I think I already said it. I only want to change the speed if the ball has reached the right edge. I think this calls for an if statement. Up until now, we've only been giving the computer commands to run no matter what. If statements are a way to say, hey dude, I want you to run this code, but only under these specific circumstances. So only change the speed if the ball has reached the right edge. And here's how it looks in code. all you do is type if, and then a pair of parentheses, and then a pair of brackets. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to put the condition, and inside the brackets, we're going to put the code to run. So the way it works is, if this condition is true, then run this code. Otherwise, don't bother. So in our case, the condition is the ball reaching the right edge. How do we know if the ball has reached the right edge? Well, we've got this variable x that tells us where the ball is, and I know that the edge of the canvas is x position 400. So let's see. When x is greater than 400, then we know that the ball has gone past the right edge a little bit. So let's see how that works. And then the code to run, we already said before, we're just going to change speed. Speed gets -5. All right, so I'm going to press restart and let's see what happens. So this time when the ball reaches the right edge, it bounces! Yay! And then it keeps going off the screen. But it's okay, because we can do the same thing on the other side. So this time we want to check if the ball has reached the left edge. So that's when x is less than, the left edge is 0. And what we want to do is make speed positive again. So we're going to get speed gets 5. All right, and I'm going to press restart. And this time, boing, boing, boing. Yay! It works. And I know we're checking to see if the ball has gone past the edges, but it feels like it's going a little too far past the edges. And if you remember, these two parameters control where the center of the ellipse is drawn. So right now, by the time the center reaches the edge, half the ellipse has already gone past the edge. So if we want to fix that, we can just stop the ellipse a little sooner. So if our edge is here at 400, and we want to stop our ellipse when it gets to here, and we can see from the function call that the ellipse has width 50. So that means from the center to the edge, that's going to be, which is 375, because that's 400 minus 25. So instead of checking for x greater than 400, I'm going to check x greater than 375. Instead of checking for x less than 0, I'll check for x less than 25. And now it's perfect! Yay! Look at that ball bounce.
corresponds.
In our last talk through, we showed how you can animate a ball bouncing off the walls using the draw function and if statements. Let's review. First, we set up some initial variables for position and speed of the ball. Then, in the draw function, which is that special function that gets called over and over when your program is running, we repaint the background and we draw an ellipse on the canvas. And we position that ellipse based on the position variable and the speed and how they affect each other. Now, without if statements, our ball just kept going forever and ever, or until we pressed restart. So we added 2 if statements down here to check and see if the ball was near the right side of the screen or the left side of the screen, and if so, we changed the speed to be positive or negative so that the ball basically would bounce back. So now we just have this ball bouncing back and forth forever. So that was pretty cool, and there's a lot of really cool animations that we can make with that. But now I want to add user interaction to this program. See, right now this program's like a TV show. If you gave it to a friend and your friend didn't know how to program, they couldn't really interact with it. All they could do is watch it. Which is cool, but it's a lot more cool if they could actually do something. So let's give the users some ways to control it. So remember earlier we learned about 2 special global variables called mousex and mousey. Those variables return numbers that tell us about the current position of the can we use them? Well, that's called oats. The place I have to wipe this out by just moving my cursor, but I want to use mouse X too. So how should I use that? Well, why don't we just make another ball first? We'll do ball, but I'm still not happy. I want to give the user even more control. I want to give the user the power to start up the second ball, to actually bring it into existence just by pressing their mouse. Well, then I need to figure we have a super is pressed and for just that. It's called mouse is pressed. And we can use it inside an if statement. So let's see, this is our second ball. So we can say if mouse is pressed, and then we'll move the ellipse call into there. So what this is doing here is telling the program that we only want to draw this ellipse if this is true, and mouse is pressed will only be true if the user is pressing their mouse. So let's try it. Ta-da! So now I can make the ball appear whenever I press. It's like it's zooming in from this parallel universe. Are you in?
In the English language, we have different parts of speech, like noun, adjective, preposition, verb, and then there are a bunch of rules that tell In the English language, we have different parts of speech, like noun, adjective, preposition, verb, and then there are a bunch of rules that tell us how to put these different parts of speech together. So if I said something like dog, books, my, eats, you'd be like, what the heck does that mean? And if you didn't realize this before, apparently you can't just stick two nouns in front of an adjective in front of a verb. It doesn't work. But if I'd switched those and said, my dog eats books, then you would totally know what I meant. I could even replace this verb eats with another verb like, I don't know, throws, and it would still make grammatical sense, even if you can't imagine my dog throwing a book. So in programming, instead of parts of speech, we have these things called types. You've already seen one of these, numbers. We use numbers all the time in our drawing code. And just like in English, there are times when it makes sense to use a number and times when it doesn't. If I started typing in this background function like 100 minus, then whatever comes next better be a number, or at least something that evaluates to a number like 14 plus 15. On the other hand, if I just typed 100 space, well, I can't really put a number after that because 100 space 10, that doesn't mean anything. So there's another type in programming called the Boolean type. And it's called Boolean because some dude named George Boole invented it. And unlike a number, which has a ton of possible values, a Boolean can only be one of two values, true or false. And you can see when I type them, they turn blue, which means they're super special awesome words. And you've already seen one place where we use Booleans, though you may not have realized it. If statements. Let's get a quick refresher on how this works. I'm just going to make a variable called number, give it a number, like 40, and write an if statement that says if number is less than 50, then I will draw this first ellipse. So I'm just going to copy this into the if statement and indent it by selecting everything and pressing tab. So now this statement says if number is less than 50, which it is, then we'll draw the top ellipse. And if I make number greater than 50, you can see that the top ellipse disappears. Alright, so this thing inside the parentheses is actually a Boolean expression. Remember, a math expression is anything that evaluates to a number, like 3 plus 2 plus 4 times 8. So a Boolean expression is anything that evaluates to a Boolean. A good way to check if an expression evaluates to a Boolean is to stick the word is in front of it and ask it like a question. If it sounds like a yes or no question, then you know it's a Boolean expression. So here we can say, is number less than 50? Yes, yes it is. And yes, that is a Boolean expression. On the other hand, if I had something like 4 plus 4, and I tried to ask, is 4 plus 4? No, not a Boolean. So back to our if statement. I can actually put anything inside these parentheses as long as it's a Boolean or a Boolean expression. So I could say if true, and that ellipse would always be drawn, or I could say if false, and the ellipse would never be drawn. I could also do something like if 3 is less than 4, which is a Boolean expression that will always evaluate to true. Well, it's kind of pointless, but the ellipse will always be drawn, or 3 greater than 4, and that's always going to be false. And I can also assign Booleans to variables, like this. So I'm going to make a new variable, var, call it Winston is cool,